This is like the worst angle. What is up, friends? Welcome back to Thief of Joy. My name is Erin, and thank you so much for being here today. So glad you're here. This is August. You wanna say hi? Kids? Yeah, can you sit? Can you sit? So, I have kind of abandoned my social work series. So I have two videos, episode 1 and episode 2 of a series that I started about 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, called What the Social Work. I started it because in the beginning, I'm still in the beginning of YouTube, but from the start, I was doing all of this research on YouTube, like how to get started, like the typical person would. I kept reading, find your niche, find your niche, find your niche, find your niche. You know, that was like the top thing that was recommended whenever you were starting YouTube. I'm like, niche? I don't know what mine would be. I guess it would be social work because that's what I do. So I guess I'll talk about that. Well, I love what I do, but ultimately I decided that when I start this channel, I didn't want to just talk about social work because that's what I do all day long. That's my full-time job. It's always in my life, and I don't necessarily always want to be talking about it whenever I am doing a hobby like this. So I decided that that would probably be like a part of my channel. The reasoning behind starting that series is to just talk about what I do because it is a part of me, so it should be a part of my channel, and then also give information out to other people. So I am picking this series back up. I'm so sorry for the people who possibly followed me because of those videos that I made. I am going to continue to make videos about social work. It's not going to be my niche, I guess you could say, or the primary topic that I talk about on my channel. So on the last episode, I talked about, okay, let me start from the beginning. The first episode, I kind of introduced myself. I gave a little bit of background about me and my life and how I ended up choosing to become a social worker. So if that is something that you're interested in, definitely go and check that out. And then episode 2, I talked about when I got into grad school, what that experience was like from the admission process to the internships that I took on and then graduation. And I kind of ended that episode off on where should you go next after graduating, because it's really up to you what you could say niche, I guess, as far as a social worker, trying to figure out where you belong in this big bubble of social work. So I'm going to kind of give my perspective on how I ended up navigating that after grad school. And I will tell you that I just sneeze. I will tell you that it was not pretty. I still have some regrets on how I went about certain things, but I don't regret where I'm at currently. So we'll get into that. Once I graduated from grad school, I was still working my job at the pediatric hospital. And I really, really, really wanted to become a social worker there. I talked about this in my episode 2 video. I did an internship at this hospital where I worked at. And I think I just thought I had it in the bag. I'm like, I work here. I had worked there for about 6 or 7 years at that point. So I'm like a VIP member at this organization because I already work here. Like, there's no way that they're not going to give me a job once I graduate. So that was the mindset that I had. 10 out of 10, don't recommend acting like you have everything together and you deserve something. Because guess what? They didn't offer me a job. I felt really, really discouraged because I'm like, well, this is what I thought I was going to do all along. When I graduated, I went and spoke with the people who monitored my internship and whatnot. And I'm like, hey, like, here's graduation. Do you have any openings? Like, can I stay here? And they basically were like, Well, we would like for our candidates to have at least 1 year of experience in order to take a job. And then hopefully within that year, you can become licensed, because obviously when I graduated, I was not licensed. And so I was just like, okay. I started questioning myself. I'm like, all right, is this really the standard as far as what they expect? Or do they just not like me? So I was really upset, needless to say. And so then I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna continue to work here doing my job that I was doing before I even started the internship. And I'm just gonna go take my licensure test, and then I'll figure it out from there. At least I have a job. So I went and took my licensing test. I barely studied for it. I remember I had some flashcards that I kind of looked at, and I had a study book that I kind of looked at, and I think it just overwhelmed me a lot to open up a book. Like, studying is not my thing. And so it just kind of overwhelmed me, and I was just like, forget it. I'm just gonna go and take it and see what happens. So that's exactly what I did. So in Georgia, whenever you're wanting to sit for a licensing test, you have to contact the board of, I think it's social workers and counselors of the state of Georgia. And you have to like submit your degree, you have to submit like references, submit all these supporting documents, and then it has to go through an approval process for you to even sit for the exam. Not even schedule the exam, just permission for you to take the exam. I think it took maybe a couple weeks. I got approved to take the exam, and then you have to actually schedule the exam. You have to pay the exam fee on top of the processing fees that you had already had to pay to just submit the application. It's expensive. I mean, it was probably, I think it was like $300 just to take the exam. And then the application fee, I think it was like $150. And so I scheduled the exam. I remember I took it, I graduated in May. I took it, I believe, in July. And the day of the exam, I woke up and I was so sick. Like, I just had the worst sinuses. And this is not me giving excuses. This was just, I'm just setting the tone on what exam day looked like for me. I knew I should have rescheduled this exam, but I wasn't sure if I could do it the day of. And I had to be there in the morning, so I was just like, whatever. I'm just gonna go take it. I kept feeling like I had to sneeze, my nose is running, and I felt like I was just being super loud. I'm a horrible test taker. So bad. I just so anxious. So I'm taking it, and I think said and done, it probably took me like 2 hours. I think you got like 3 hours total. I clicked submit, and it said fail on it. So you knew, like, as soon as you were done with the exam, you submitted it, that you either passed or you failed. I just remember being like so devastated and so embarrassed. And so then you have to go out to the front desk and they print you out like your report of the exam. And I was just like so embarrassed standing up there waiting for them to hand me this report that says that I failed it. And then I started reading over the report, and I failed it by 2 points. And so it wasn't some dramatic thing like, oh, I failed it by 50 points or whatever. It was 2 points. And then I remember going home, I'm already crying in the car, and the test was in Atlanta. So there's always construction going on in Atlanta. I guess I hit like was going through a construction site, and a rock popped up and hit my windshield, put a really nice dent in it, and the dent like eventually like spread into a crack. And so I'm just like, this is just the most ridiculous day of my life. Like, questioning if I even should have gone to school to be a social worker at this point. I was so upset. I'm like, this is the story of my life. Like, I always, try, even though I don't really, I probably could have studied a lot more, but I had just graduated school. I'm like, most of the things are still fresh in my mind. I just really was so bummed. Whenever you fail this exam, you cannot take it for another 3 months. So I'm like, all right, well, let me see what I can do in the meantime and see if I can apply for jobs and find somebody who would hire me without my license, without my Lmsw. So that's licensed medical social worker. I started applying for jobs, and I went on a couple of interviews. I remember I went to interview for an advocacy center, nonprofits, a school position where I would be doing mental health counseling. And I actually was offered the job for that, and I accepted it initially, but the pay, I was making more at my job that I had, than I would at that particular job. And so I just really thought about it. I'm like, I just don't feel like this is where I'm supposed to be. It was a far drive. There was just a lot stacked up against it that I ended up telling them no. And, but I was just like, man, I mean, I guess any experience is good experience. And yes, that typically is my feelings a lot of the time, but I just didn't want to accept something just to have something. I just was like, you know what, I just need to wait and see what happens. And I found out from a friend that I went to grad school with that she accepted, this was several months later. At this point, we're probably in September, July, August, September. And I still had not found anything. October rolled around, still had not found anything. And at this point, I could have retaken my test, but I was so focused on trying to get a job that I was like, was not even preparing to take my test. So eventually, one of my friends that I went to grad school with, she posted on our cohort page that the company that she worked for, the hospital she worked for, had some job openings, and to let her know if anyone was interested. So I'm like, okay, well, working in a hospital is what I already know. The only problem is it's working with adults. I always thought that I would go into working with children no matter what I did. So again, I had all these expectations, which not to say that having expectations is a bad thing, but I kind of let those expectations be the forefront of everything that I was looking for, that I wasn't really stepping back to be like, okay, if this doesn't work out, or if these opportunities come to me, then yes, I will consider them. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna try and go this avenue. I got in contact with her and I was like, hey, here's my resume, if you could give it to your supervisor. And then I found out that this company was having a job fair as well. So I went to the job fair because I'm like, okay, if I send in my resume and then I go to a job fair, that will hopefully look good and make me seem like I'm super interested, because I was. So I go to the job fair. Long story short, HR was there and they were like scanning resumes, and basically they turned me away and would not let me talk to the manager. Was there, would not let me talk to the manager because I didn't have enough experience. I was a new graduate, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this just, like, I get it, I don't have experience, but how am I supposed to get experience if nobody will even give me the chance? I know a lot of people go through this. And so I left again feeling discouraged. And I reached out because at this point I had already gotten contact with the manager, and I explained to her, I said, hey, I'm so sorry, but I tried to meet with you, and unfortunately your security would not let me come and talk to you. And she was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Eventually she offered me an interview. So I did get to go interview, and I feel like being persistent and just really making the effort did work out for me. So I go and interview, and it went well. And I accepted the job there, and I work there. So I started this job in the end of November of 2019. And then, as we all know, COVID happened the following year, starting in about January, February, March. March was when it kind of got the craziest, if I remember correctly. And I'm a new social worker. And so imagine, and I know some of you may have experienced this, imagine never doing this job, and then you are kind of thrown into the cycle of COVID happens and everything changes, the whole dynamic. So initially you're learning how to do things one way, and then now you've got all these barriers with discharge planning because nobody is taking patients, even if COVID or not. You're just kind of having to change the whole way you do things. And honestly, looking back on that experience, I think that was really good for me because I learned how to navigate all these problems without even realizing it because it was just, I had no option. I had to do my job. And honestly, if I have to summarize social work into a sentence, I would say social work is basically finding the puzzles that fit together for this particular patient or problem. Because it's like putting puzzles together. You got to get this and you got to get this and you got to get this in order for the whole picture to come together. And then let's just say that you're hit with this problem, like this patient can't go back to the nursing home because they have COVID. Or for months and months, nobody was allowed to visit the hospital. I mean, we weren't allowing visitors at all. So people were not able to see their loved ones on a daily basis or ever. So I was being called constantly like, hey, can I talk to my family member? Hey, can you give me an update? Because they weren't able to physically be there. While they were frustrated, it was frustrating to me because, I mean, I'm trying to take care of 20, 30 patients. And so you're trying to manage this for everybody. And that's a lot for one person. I mean, and it's a lot for somebody who's just starting their career. So during that time, it was so stressful, so stressful. But looking back on it, I mean, I feel like I did the best that I could in everything that I did. And I learned a whole lot about how to not make shortcuts, but how to better delegate my time, like my time management greatly improved, and how to be creative on how to solve certain problems, that came up. So that already come up. Like, I swear, like, every time someone comes to the hospital, usually they have things going on outside, like in their environment or with their family or whatever. And then to come into the hospital because of a medical problem, you're bringing all that stress with you. So you already have that going on in general. And then when COVID happened, it was just like 100 times worse. So that was very interesting. And I mean, that was probably the majority of 2020 was everything centered around COVID. I used to love watching Grey's Anatomy until they started bringing COVID into the picture. And I was just like, look, I'm already living this on a day-to-day basis. I do not want to hear about COVID anymore because, I mean, you couldn't even go to restaurants. We all lived it, so we all know. But so that was just super frustrating. It was everywhere that I went and there was just no getting away from it. So that went on for the majority of 2020. 2021, things started getting a little bit better. I mean, we were allowing families to come into the hospital again. I mean, we were still having to get COVID tests for everybody to go back to their nursing home or assisted living or whatever. And so it still was bringing barriers for sure, but things were, getting a little bit better. So I worked at this particular hospital for 2 years. And then during that time, I had my daughter in February of 2021. And I mean, I'll talk about my birth story and everything in a separate video, but she came early. And I know that the stress from like COVID and everything going on in my work environment, not just my work environment, but just like in the world, I'm pretty sure that's probably what put me in the position I was whenever I had to be induced to have her. So after she was born, I was on maternity leave for about 3 months. I didn't go back until May. And I worked at that hospital until January of 2022. And the only reason that I transferred to a different hospital, but same company, and it was closer to home. The only reason I transferred was because I was so sick of the drive to Atlanta. I just, and I was so stressed out. you know, now that I had my daughter, things were drastically different. And so I needed to make changes that would better meet myself and my family. So I decided to reach out to someone at the hospital that I'm at now. Come on. Stop meowing. You're being rude. Come on. Do you want to come see the people? Nicky. You're so annoying. Yes, you are. Here, have a seat. Okay, so it was December 2021 or January 2022. I decided to reach out. Their director there used to work in Atlanta, and so a lot of people knew him in Atlanta and spoke very highly of him, and they were like, oh, he would be great to work for. You should definitely reach out to him. So I did that. And it was funny at the time when I reached out to him initially, he was like, oh, thank you, but we don't have anything available. Then about 3 weeks later, he sends me an email and he's like, oh, actually, we've had a change in our staffing and we do have something available now. And so I went and interviewed, and telling your manager that, it's so awkward to tell your manager that you're going to interview because it's within the same system. So they all know each other. And so obviously I want to do the right thing and be like, hey, I'm going to interview, like may or may not get the job, but I have to let you know. And that was an HR requirement. So I went and spoke to her before I did that. And then I went for the interview. It went well. And I ultimately ended up accepting the job offer and transferred. It was pretty easy to transfer. I didn't have to do any training. I mean, because I already knew how to do the job. But I will say, going from a large, I think the hospital in Atlanta that I was at has like 600 beds. And now the hospital that I'm at has, I think, capacity, we could hold up to like 65, 70 patients. I was just like, oh my gosh, like it was just such a environment change. However, I mean, and I mean this as nicely and honestly as possible, it's the same, different location. I mean, I feel like anybody in the medical field would tell you that the nurses, the doctors, the social workers, the whoever. I mean, healthcare is not perfect by any means. And it's just like any consumer service. You're going to have people who love you and love the hospital, love the company. And then you're going to have people who think that you're the worst person in the world. This is the worst hospital I've ever been to. This is the worst company. I would never send my loved one to this company ever again, to this hospital ever again. And so, I mean, and the people that I typically see, I mean, the problems are universal. It's just a lot different because in Atlanta, Atlanta has a lot of resources to offer, but where I'm at now, we're not close to the city. So we don't have as much to offer people. So we, again, have to be a little creative, and I have to do a little bit more social working, like as far as beyond what we already have to meet the needs for my patient. That's kind of how I navigated my post-grad school life. One regret that I have is that I am still not licensed. I have my degree, I have my MSW degree, but I do not have that L in front of it. I am not a licensed social worker. And to be honest, like where I'm at in my job, it doesn't really help or hurt me. I've been with the company now for 3 years. Maybe that's why I've never really made a point to finally do it, like to take the exam again, because obviously it's been well over 3 months. I could have taken it probably 18 times at this point. That is something that I wish I would have done previously. I really wish that I would have stuck to my guns and in 3 months taken it again. And if I failed it, then, you know, you get more knowledge every time you take the test. So of course it changes, the test changes, you know, ever so often, but you kind of get more of an idea of what is on it. And so I really wish I would have done that. And so actually this year, I didn't mention this in my goals video just because it was kind of a more very specific goal for me. And I have more than 5 goals, like, and I just wanted to talk about the top 5 ones. But my goal of this year is to study for the exam and retake it. I may have to take a refresher course because obviously I'm not using every little thing that I learned in my grad school program in my job, because it just, you know, wherever you go, there's going to be different job tasks and whatnot. I'm not doing therapy, so I'd have to like brush up on therapy related things and the different types of disorders and, you know, stuff like that. But my goal this year is to study and take my test. So I'm telling you guys now, I'm in hopes that it will hold me accountable. That is what I want to do this year. The thing is that because so when I took the test the first time, I hadn't got married yet. I got married in November of 2019. I had taken the test July of 2019. So since then I've gotten married. My name has obviously changed. Not obviously, some people don't change their name, but I changed my name. And so now I will have to contact the board and figure out how I go about a name change. Do I have to submit my references again? Like, has it been so long that I have to completely start over and do the process all over? Or because I have registered and taken the test before, am I already approved to just take it again? So these are some things that I'm gonna have to research and find out how I'm supposed to proceed in hopefully becoming licensed this year. And then, I mean, I don't know if this will change my career path. I don't know if I'm going to be a medical social worker the rest of my career, but at least being licensed, I can say, oh, I did that. Oh, I accomplished something else in my career. And if I wanted to change careers, it definitely will give me a boost up, because I know when I've looked at jobs, most of them want you to have a licensure in the state of Georgia. So I realized that that is a big barrier if I wanted to ultimately move up in my career. So that is a goal that I'm going to work on this year. And so that's kind of where I'm at, from where I started after grad school and where I currently am at. I still have goals to work on and accomplish, but I'm loving my career. I've learned so much. I've met a lot of people, and I've really learned how to multitask and strategize and look outside the box. It's been really good for me, and just like my mental health and how I deal with anxiety provoking situations and whatnot. So, and it's been good for my career. So I'm really happy with the way that things have worked out, but there of course are things that I wish I would have done differently, such as becoming licensed. So I hope that was helpful. To sum all of this up, anybody who is still in grad school or graduating, I would definitely work on getting yourself set up for that exam. And if you don't pass it the first time and you have to wait a certain period of time, you know, keep refreshing yourself and preparing yourself for the next time, because I don't want anybody to look back and be like, man, I could have already done that. That was 3 years ago. Like, I could already be licensed. And so my biggest advice is just to keep going, keep trying, don't give up, don't get discouraged, don't take it personally, and just know that it's coming for you. You're gonna be successful. And I mean, if it doesn't work out the way that you want it to, maybe that's a sign that something bigger is coming along the way. So this is where I'm going to end this video. The next episode, I am going to talk about what a hospital social worker does, so that you guys can kind of have an idea of what I do as a hospital social worker, if that is something that you are thinking about doing. I hope you guys enjoyed this video today. Thank you for watching my series, What the Social Work. Again, if you want to know more about me and my story as far as how I got to where I'm at now, please watch episode 1 and episode 2. Maybe you'll find something helpful. Maybe you'll just learn more about me. don't know if you want to, but it's definitely a topic that I am really passionate about, but I try not to let it overtake my whole entire life. So anyways, I will see you guys in the next video, and I hope you're having a great day and find joy in whatever you do. Bye.